everyone. Thank you so much for making it here today for our Snap Connected Women event. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Farima, and I lead the retail and e-commerce industry here at Snap Dubai. I am also a co-lead for a Snap Women Employee Resource Group at Snapchat.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I'm co-leading with Farima. What I do at Snapchat is I look after media partnerships and programming on Snapchat, which means we help bring content onto the Discover feed. So while I co-lead with Farima on the Women's ERG, which is an initiative to drive initiatives for women in Snapchat in the region, in the community, and in the industry, we also have a lot of women here at Snapchat that help us drive these initiatives as part of this drive for the region. We have around 27 amazing women who are part of Snapchat and in this crowd as well today, driving these efforts for us, for the region and for Snapchat.
Great. Well, welcome to Snap Connections. First of all, Snap Connections is actually a series of events that we hosted here at Expo Dubai. And these sessions are, the idea is to bring thought leaders from the region to bring the minds together to create a more sustainable future. So Snap Connection, Connected Women is really the primary objective of this event. It's just to discuss some of those topics that are affecting women equality and also empowerment for the future, or some social issues that we're facing today in our industry and region. This event, we partner with IAB, ABG, and UN Women on Stereotyping Alliances, and also connecting women in tech. So there are 3 organizations that we partner with on initiatives. We work with them very closely, and all of our women, ERG women, are members of those organizations and supporting them. Also, just for you to know what Snap Women ERG is about, it's an internal resource group that basically our mission is really to make sure that we're supporting and advancing our Snap Women community into future leadership roles and growth and development, but also outreach into community and helping mentorship and all of those younger women out there that potentially can start in the world of tech and growth, and also ensuring that we bring, at the end of the day, we're a platform to bring everyone together and hear out what are the things that we could do to support the growth of women for future. Also, as part of this activation, we are going to cover a few things around D&I in general, because we know that diversity is so important for us to have a progressive plan and have a sustainable future. So our key industry bodies representatives actually accepted our invite, and we're very honored to have them today to cover some of those data and subjects. I would like to now invite Sally Mosa on stage. Please join me to welcome Sally.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Farima, for that wonderful discussion and introduction, in fact. And it's great to be with all of you here today at Snap Connected Women. Now, put your hand up if you use Google Maps or other geolocation apps. Pretty much the entire room, just as I thought. Now, who knows here that it is, in fact, a Turkish woman named Dr. Shireen Takanay who pioneered the tech behind these geolocation apps? In fact, when she first took up the work to work on these technologies back in the 1990s, they had to give her a whole new job title: Wireless Geolocation Technical Prime. It sounds like a superhero, right? But this was a job title for a job that didn't even have a job description yet. And so when I interviewed her, she said when she would go out and she would talk about the things that she was working on, she would say to people, thanks to these technologies, we will be able to travel to new cities and to find our way around without asking for directions. So this was more than 25 years ago. You can imagine, people looked at her like she had 2 heads. Today, Dr. Shireen holds 9 patents. 8 of those are directly related to geolocation, GSM, networks as well. And she is now the chair of the Global Engineering Deans Council. Just a year ago, we saw Her Excellency, the Minister of State for Advanced Technology, Her Excellency Sara Al-Amiri, leading the UAE's Mars Hope Orbiter mission into space, making the UAE the 5th country to reach the Red Planet and only the 2nd to do it on a maiden flight. Her Highness, yes, absolutely. Her Highness Sheikh Badur Al-Qasimi was only the 2nd woman and the first Arab woman to become the president of the International Publishers Association in its 125-year history. Expo 2020 Dubai that we have been enjoying and millions of people have been marveling at from all over the world has been helmed, of course, by the one and only Director General, Her Excellency Reem Al-Hashimi. You know, it's interesting because the Andalusian Muslim scholar Ibn Arabi famously said, he said, "Al-makan alladhi la yu'annath, la yu'awwalu alayh." The place that isn't feminized cannot be relied upon. And it's very clear that the UAE takes this idea very seriously. Yes, absolutely. And so it's really interesting because the achievements of women in the UAE, even in the Arab world, are actually quite astonishing when we look at them on a global scale. Because seeing women in positions like this is still the exception. It's not the norm. And then when we look at things like the marketing industry, media industries, we don't see this progressive vision for women being reflected there, and it makes you wonder, why not? Research shows that girls from about the age of 5, they start developing self-limiting beliefs and they start thinking that they're not as capable as boys, that their gender cannot be or do anything that they want. And this is often referred to as brilliance bias. And so this develops into adulthood and it becomes the unentitled mindset. So basically, we put these kind of titles and descriptions on boys that we call them brilliant, we call them smart, but we don't say that about girls. And so those who are not called that, when they grow up, they feel unentitled to those positions that are normally held by those who think and are told that they are brilliant and smart. Now, does anybody know why we have brilliance bias? Anybody at all? Okay. It's because of the stories that we are told. These are the stories that shape who we think we need to become in order to be loved and accepted. So let's take a look at what it is that we tell boys. We tell boys to go out, to explore, to discover, to experiment, to earn, to achieve, to master, to self-actualize. This is what we tell boys. What do we tell girls? We tell girls to be a good girl. Everybody got it. Be a good girl. And that is because, as girls and women, we are taught that our value comes from making other people happy. And I call that the good girl syndrome. Whether it's being the obedient daughter, be good to your parents, make sure you always listen to them, do what they ask. Then you go to school, get the good grades, be pleasing to your teachers, don't make too much noise, don't be too opinionated, right? And then you need to fit in with society's impossible ideas of what it is to be beautiful and perfect. Make sure you're thin enough, make sure you're white enough, make sure you look perfect all the time. Because all of that is leading up to marriage. Yes, I can see people mouthing it. It's there. There's the expectation. Make sure you find a good husband. And make sure you get married and you keep your husband happy. And make sure you'll have lots of babies, particularly male babies. Don't forget the male babies, right? And then after you have the babies, make sure you bounce back to your pre-baby body. And then make sure that you're a really good mum. Be there for your kids. Make your family happy. It's so clear that women and girls are expected to serve. Have you ever thought about why Siri and Alexa and all of these other apps that give us whatever we want, they're always women and female voices? Because women and girls are expected to serve, right? And it's interesting because when we become mothers, we idolize the ones that are selfless, that give everything they have to their families and to their kids, where there's nothing left of them. We expect mothers to become martyrs for their family. They are held up as the best example of what it is to be a mum. Incredibly dangerous, but that's what happens. There's another reason why brilliance bias is so prevalent, and it's because women are often left out of history. It's his story, it's not her story, right? And so, does anybody here know the percentage of women represented in history books? Anybody want to take a guess? 25%, but pretty close. Here's what they did. They still analyzed history books even further. One history book, which had 819 pages, had a total mention of women that amounted to 1 page. Another one that was 1,000 pages had 3% dedicated to anything about women. Anybody know why we have March Women's Month? Do you know the story behind it? So this is why. There were 5 women who came together, most of them are teachers, who came together and said, we need to have a time of the year where we broadcast women's historical achievements, because they were getting questions from their students about the women's movement, and it wasn't covered in the history books. It wasn't there. So they had to invent Women's Month for this purpose. And it's interesting because another reason why you don't see a lot of women in history books is because there's an amazing number of cases where men actually took credit for the work and the achievements of women. And so they were literally erased from history. This here is Hedy Lamarr, an icon of the silver screen. But not just that, she was an incredible scientist and inventor in her own right. Her story is one of just so many. She actually invented a radio guidance system for Allied torpedoes. Yep, they showed it to the Navy. The Navy pretended that they weren't interested in the technology. And so behind the scenes, the Navy went, put a patent on it, wrote her out of it completely, and then they used that technology for a whole host of weapons guidance systems. But this is not the most important thing about Hedy Lamarr. The most important thing about her is that her work is the literal basis for all of our Wi-Fi, CDMA, and Bluetooth technology that the whole world would shut down right now without. But this is what we're dealing with. Today, media representation is where these stories are told, or they're not being told as well. We still don't see in film and TV and advertising the stories of women who are the experts, who are the pioneers in tech, in business. We still, in the default, we think about men in those positions. Who knows the riddle about the doctor and the son who were in the car accident? Who's heard that one? Very few. This is interesting. Okay, so this is how it goes. A doctor and his son were in a car accident together. The doctor dies on the scene, and the son is rushed to hospital for emergency surgery. The doctor there takes one look at him and says, I can't operate on this boy. He is my son. How is that? How is that? I can see you going, huh? Do you know? It still amazes me to this day how many people don't get that. because we still don't associate women and mothers as doctors, as experts. These things are separate. They're still seen as separate. So important that we pick up. This is just one of the biases that we're still trying to break in this day and age. Now, who knows Manal Rostom? Hands up. Incredible, incredible woman. One of the most inspiring women that I have ever had the honor of knowing. She's got a string of world firsts to her name, including being the first Egyptian, not just Egyptian woman, Egyptian, to complete 5 out of the 6 major world marathons. She's also summited some of the highest peaks in the world, Mont Blanc, Kilimanjaro, you name it. She also established the most incredible global online group called Surviving Hijab to break the stereotypes around Muslim women that she was experiencing and Muslim women all over the world experience. She's pretty phenomenal, right? We agree. She's very open about saying that she's still not seen as enough by her family and by society because she's not married, she doesn't have kids, and she's over 40. And you know, some people are going to be in this audience going, yeah, that's the Middle East. This is what it's like, Muslim women in the Middle East. No. How many people here wear Spanx? Guys excluded, obviously. Anybody here wear Spanx or at least know of the brand Spanx? Who knows of the brand? Yeah? Right, exactly. Spanx billionaire, Sarah Blakely, she had a very similar experience. She didn't get married until she was 37. And she always used to get women coming up to her and saying, it's okay, darling, it's all right, you'll find a husband. You will find a husband, it's all right. They used to say that to her. And she's like, rarely did anyone ever come up to me and encourage me to follow my dreams. And she says it's because of the limited opportunities that she saw her mum and her grandmothers have that drove her to become her own CEO instead of waiting for a husband. Now she's happily married, she's got 3 kids, but this is what's going on all over the place. And so it's because of these biases that women are not out there wanting to, really talk about who they are, what they do. And it's interesting because I'm a public speaker and a coach, and people often say to me, well, women just need to get more confident. They need to become more confident. And I'm like, yeah. But what is confidence? The first question that you need to ask yourself when you want to become more confident is this: who do you think you are? That question is critical, and I'll tell you why. Tony Robbins once said, "The strongest force in the human personality is the need to remain consistent with how we define ourselves." And so if we as girls and as women, we are being told that who we are is limited to pleasing others, that we are the support, we are not the lead, that we are not celebrated as the innovators, as a scientist, in tech, in business, if all of that is going on and we're not celebrated as mothers at the same time, then we can forget about seeing women in positions of power like this. If you can't see it, you can't be it. And I say here, mothers, it's really important, that riddle really brought it home, I think. It's really important to say mothers here as well, because that's part of who we are. And we need to honor that part of ourselves too. Valuing mothers and motherhood is a vital part of breaking the bias. It is really astonishing to think the Apple campus, who has seen the Apple campus, the incredible spaceship-like building? Yeah? It cost $5 billion to build. It has the most incredible 100,000 square foot gym, but it has exactly 0 childcare facilities. So it just goes to show you how far we have to go in embracing mothers and women into work, into the corporate culture, into tech. It's so important because still as mothers, we are asked to go to work like we have no children and to parent like we don't work. Motherhood is the work that holds up entire societies and economies, and it's really time that we looked at it in a way that we work with it and not against it anymore. And so it's really interesting because who here has had a big idea where you go, oh my God, that's amazing. I just thought of something amazing. And maybe it's a bit big and maybe it scared you a little bit and you were like, but I want to do this. And then you go and you share that idea with someone. But then they kind of look at you after you've shared everything and they kind of go, who do you think you are, like, wanting to do this thing or be this thing? Or who do you think, who's been in that situation before? Who's had that happen to them? A lot of us. A lot of us. And so this is what happens, particularly for us as women. We have that sense of self, the brilliance bias, the unentitled mindset that comes in and says, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you can't do this, you're just not enough. And we carry all of that with us, which is why before anybody else asks you that question, you need to come and ask yourself, who do you think you are? And you need to get really clear on the answer so that you can know who you need to become in order to create the change that you want to see. It's vital, because the way that confidence happens is when you step into the power of your own story, the power of who you were born to be, and you own it. That is confidence. When your vision for yourself becomes part of who you are, that is confidence. That is how we get there. It's interesting. This is me, early days in radio about 20 years ago. I've been asked that question so many times growing up in Australia. Who do you think you are? Growing up, I didn't see women in the media who were Arab, who were Muslim, who had an Arab name. None of that. We didn't see that. We saw Muslim women, and Muslims in general. They were basically the terrorists and the criminals. That's it. That's all. The only time you ever saw Muslims, both in Hollywood and in real life. Muslim women were always portrayed as the ones who were oppressed, invisible, and powerless. The complete opposite of every Muslim woman that I had ever known. The Muslim women that I knew, they were incredible leaders who took inspiration from powerful female icons in Islamic history all the way back to the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and beyond. I remember hearing the story of Khadija, radiallahu anha. Khadija was a noble woman, and she was a businesswoman in her own right. And she was actually the one to employ the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And she saw him, she admired him, and she was like, he's an amazing guy. So what does she do? She goes and proposes. She proposed to him at the age of 40, and he was 25. Now, if 2022, we looked at that, we'd be like, she's a cougar. Right? Right? And it just goes to show you that age bias is one of the things we don't talk enough about with women. So they got married, and she was an incredible partner and support to him. He loved her for a quarter of a century until she passed away. And even after that, he kept sending food and gifts to her family and her friends because he never forgot her. Her story is just one of many. You could talk about as well Fatima al-Fihri, the woman who established Al-Qarawiyyin in Morocco, the world's first university. Or let's go back even further than that. Let's go back to the first ever known author. Not the first female author, the first ever known author. Her name was Enheduanna, and she was a woman who lived in the 23rd century BCE in ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, where I'm from. And she was an ancient triple threat. She was a princess, she was a priestess, and she was a writer and a poet. So these are the stories of the women that I was inspired by. These are the stories that I grew up with. And it's the reason why I went into radio. because I wanted to tell those stories that were not being told. And when we did that, it empowered us to tell our own stories and to embrace our own identities as young Arab, Australian, Muslim women, and everything else that we were doing. We could tell that to the world. So important. So we need to flip the script. And it's not just so that we can see the incredible magnitude of the possibilities that are out there for women, but we need to do it so we can build the infrastructure necessary to see more women in these important and dynamic roles. We need to see those narratives of women normalized for boys and for men as well. They need to see those narratives normalized of women who are taking up these incredible positions in every area of society. But there's another crucial reason why we need to flip the script for men too. We teach our boys to be strong providers. We teach them not to be weak and to certainly never get emotional. But in teaching them that, we teach them that vulnerability is shameful. And so many men never learn to deal with their feelings. They learn that they have to keep them inside. Don't show any weakness. Don't show any emotion. And what that can do is lead to an incredible host of mental health issues, addictive behavior, and violence and aggression for men. The toxic masculinity that we see today. Emotions are there to guide us in our lives. Emotions are there as signals for what we need to do in our lives, what we need to feel, what we need to understand, what we need to process. And if we don't have the space to do that and to release those emotions in a really healthy way, it gets incredibly problematic, not just for that person, but for everyone around them, whether it's men or women. So the truth is, courage and strength cannot exist without emotion. And it is courage, it takes courage to truly be open and vulnerable with other people, because that is where love and connection happens, and that is where we can truly be ourselves with each other and be honest about who we are. And so this is where the media has a massive role to play, because we still don't take well to seeing men in non-traditional roles as well. So it's really important that we do see them there, especially when we need them. We need to see them there more than ever. If we want to see change, we have to change the way that we raise our boys. It's vital. It takes 60 seconds or less, if you're on Snap, to tell a news story and to redefine what it means to be a man or a woman in this day and age, in this moment today. And you know, when we're exposed to between 5,000 and 10,000 ads plus and endless snaps, stories and videos online and everything else, we're at a critical point where we really need to be more intentional and creative with the stories that we are telling, because that has the power to transform the possibilities for both girls and boys to be able to change the culture and once and for all break the bias. We have to start talking about women and girls not in relation to other people. She is not worthy because she is someone's daughter, sister, mother. No, she is worthy, period. We have to start thinking like that. Now, in breaking the bias, I know a lot of you are thinking, okay, that's great, but what can I do? What can I do to break the bias? I'm just one person. Can I really make a difference? And my answer to you is absolutely. So let me tell you a story. My mother in the early 1970s, she finished high school and it was time for her to go into higher education. So she goes to the Institute of Technology in Baghdad at the time, and she wants to study engineering. And so there's like a whole host of specialities in engineering, electrical engineering, mechanical, whatever. And she goes very specifically, she goes, I want to do building and construction engineering. And she applies. And they come back to her and they go, it's not for girls. Sorry, no. Building and construction, guys on construction sites, no, we don't do this, we don't offer this course to girls. Go and choose a different speciality. And by the way, this is interesting because there's that question again. It gets asked in different ways and you have to listen. Who are you? Who do you think you are wanting to choose building and construction as a course to do? It's not for girls. She wasn't having it. She was like, no, I'm not choosing a different speciality. I want to do building and construction, so I'm going to go and do it. So she applies again, and they're like, okay, she's crazy, whatever, let her in. She stood her ground. They let her in. She graduated, the only girl in the top 10 amongst hundreds of students in that class. But that's not the best part. The best part of the story is that after she got in, other girls saw that she got in and they applied as well. They're like, what? We're doing this. Because they started to see the possibilities. And it is vital for each and every single one of us. So that is exactly what I want to leave you with. That change happens in those moments of courage where we decide to step into our story and to follow our purpose and to really break through those old limitations that have been set in front of us and to rewrite our story and step into our power. But more importantly, when you succeed, you never succeed alone. Because it is impossible for you to take your gifts and go out there and change the world without influencing and inspiring other people to do the same. You just will. And so others are going to see that you are doing what they thought they couldn't, and they're going to say, I can, and I will. That is the magic of your story. Because when you understand the magnitude of who you are, the next time that somebody asks you that question, who do you think you are? You're going to say, stand back and I'll show you. Thank you so much.
Sally, that was absolutely wonderful. Lots of shivers, lots of goosebumps, lots of, yes, I know who I am. Thank you so much for that beautiful, inspirational speech, and I hope everyone was inspired as much as I was. I would like to now invite Priya on stage and to take us through some really interesting data around D&I. Thank you, Priya. Welcome.
Sally is amazing. She's inspiring. She's a tough act to follow. But yeah, I'm here to present the census that was conducted by the WFA. But before I do that, just give me a little bit of time to share with you about the organizations that actually SNAP is a member of, because I love to take the opportunity to talk about the work that Rasha and I are doing, and of course the organizations that are there. I hope I know how to work this. Okay. So a little bit about I'm going to start with the Advertising Business Group. The Advertising Business Group, the ABG, was actually formed quite a while ago. It was formed in 2007. And at that point of time, they had a very specific mandate. So they were known as the Advertisers Business Group. So essentially, their members were only advertisers, so companies like Unilever, P&G, L'Oreal. And they had a very, very specific mandate, which was to drive media measurement. The agenda, for whatever reason, never really took off. The ABG kind of became a little defunct. So in 2015, 2016, we decided to revive it. But of course, under a different mandate. We renamed it as the Advertising Business Group. So our agenda was to include the entire, that'll be better, okay. We decided to include the entire advertising and marketing ecosystem. So the Advertising Business Group is essentially a not-for-profit. We're registered under the Dubai Chamber, and our mandate is to bring about industry self-regulation. So we work on what we think are potential areas of focus. I'm not going to say issues, because what we want to do is we want the industry to self-regulate, just so that we don't have regulators stepping in, with the objective of driving increased consumer confidence, in certain specific areas. And the way we do it is by the three ways. We essentially try and set a standard. We then build the awareness around it and the capability to ensure that the industry is aware and can work together to achieve that. And the third is to, of course, provide a platform for cooperation. Actually, it's an interesting story. One of the reasons why the ABG, we decided to revive it, is because this was between 2014 and 2016. Key advertisers like Unilever, P&G, L'Oreal, there were always issues in our advertising. And what would end up happening is that the CEOs would end up sending letters to each other, and there was never a platform where they could sit down and actually discuss it. And that was primarily the reason why we decided to set up the ABG. But having said that, ever since we've set it up, we've never had an issue. So, it's probably just one of the things. But it's also really incredible because, and I sit on the ABG board, and it's really incredible to see the industry come together and work together, on areas that really matter. We started with, in 2016, November, when we set up the ABG, we started with about 17 members. We've now grown ourselves to 60 members plus. You can see a whole host of advertisers, platforms. We've got agencies, research agencies, and everybody out there. So, and our members effectively kind of account for about 70% of the region's ad spend. So that's also a big responsibility on us. And these are the 5 areas that we kind of focus on with 3 key enablers. So driving media measurement is a key project that the ABG is leading on. It's something, like I mentioned, that was started in 2007, and it's very, very important for driving improved effectiveness in advertising. The second area is, of course, the whole diversity, equity, inclusion, gender unstereotyping, given the impact of advertising on culture. And the third area is digital media self-regulation. E-com and sustainability are 2 kind of new areas that we've started focusing on. And the 3 key enablers that we work with are, one is, of course, engaging the youth. So we try and work with universities, engage with the future talent that's going to come into the industry. Of course, one of the key problems in our market is that we don't have enough local research. So that's an area that we are actually looking at driving. We have worked with Zayed University in the past on 2 key research. And one of them actually provided us a business case to launch the Unstereotype Alliance. And I'll explain about the Unstereotype Alliance. We've recently actually pulled together a research group, which is, they're members from across the industry, and they're the ones who are actually going to help now drive increased local research for us. And then the third one is the Disputes Resolution Committee, which is formed of individuals from NGOs, academia, and across the sector. This is the reason why we had actually set ourselves up, but ever since we've set up the Dispute Resolution Committee, we've never had to call on them. So that's a little bit about the ABG, a slide only on the Unstereotype Alliance. And the Unstereotype Alliance was actually, it was launched at Cannes in 2017. And one of the reasons actually that it was launched was because there was a research that was done by Unilever in the UK, which effectively showed that our consumers were saying we don't connect with your advertising anymore. We don't connect with the advertising that's being showcased to us, because all that the advertising is doing is it is showing individuals in your advertising as one-dimensional. So, the usual advertising we have, woman is a mother, and that's about it. She's the one who's managing the washing machine, looking after the house. That's the kind of advertising you see in our region. But what they were telling us, our consumers, is that we are so much more. I'm definitely a mother, but I'm an adventurer. I read, I run, and I am so much more. And I need to see this reflected in your advertising for me to connect. And so that was really the impetus for setting up the Unstereotype Alliance. The Unstereotype Alliance is convened by UN Women, which is the gender equality arm for the UN. And what the UN, what they have done is that they bring the industry together. So the Unstereotype Alliance is led by the industry, but we work with UN Women. And our agenda is really, it's a thought and action platform to effectively address the stereotypes and biases that advertising is reflecting. So, of course, I think all of us are within the industry. We understand that while advertising reflects culture, it also influences it. So it has a very large impact. And we have to use the power of advertising to drive the change that Sally was kind of talking about. We set up the UAE chapter we launched it in November 2020, so at the lag end of COVID. We're the 5th chapter to be launched globally, and we're very, very proud of that. And our agenda, so while the Unstereotype Alliance doesn't just look at gender, it looks at all aspects of bias, addressing bias and unstereotyping. It looks at race, color, nationality, all of those. In the UAE, we decided we, of course, had to focus on gender initially. So that's really our ambition, is to showcase more progressive portrayals of gender, and that means both men and women. We want to really help do that by addressing stereotypes and biases in media. So that's just a little bit. And let me now get to the meat, which is why I'm here, which is to present this census. So while the advertising industry has been largely aware as to how stereotypical their advertising is, one of the things that they haven't really focused on is the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion work internally. And when COVID happened, one of the great learnings that came out of it was that the largest impact of COVID was actually on women. They carried the double burden of managing both house and continuing with their professional life. And it was also what was called a shadow pandemic. There was increased violence against women. And of course, a large part, of course, in our region, and women were a lot more vocal because they didn't have any other way. And then, of course, because of the economic impact, a lot of organizations couldn't really focus on the diversity, equity, inclusion agenda. So what was really the true impact of COVID is what the what the census is actually trying to figure out. It was led by WFA, which is the World Federation of Advertisers. The ABG is a member of the WFA globally. This was the first census that has ever been done globally on this agenda for the advertising industry. They received a great amount of support from brands, from agencies, from media, from consultancies across the board. And in 27 markets, national associations similar to the ABG actually supported this entire endeavor. And their aim was really to assess not just workforce composition, but also the perceptions in terms of what has, what is the sense of belonging and the perception of progress that the advertising industry is trying to drive. And the objective is, of course, to create the baseline, because this is not a one-off. We have actually just confirmed to the WFA that we are going to be taking part in the next one. So hopefully this is going to be ongoing and we will get better data. The reason I'm just mentioning the better data is that out of the 10,000 responses that they received globally, we received 302 from within our region. Was it good? probably not. We're hoping to really push the industry in the second round and get more responses. The maximum amount obviously came from, not obviously, but they came from the media agency, followed by brands, creative agencies, and media and tech. You had more responses from men. Probably that's a reflection of the representation within the industry, 58% men, 42% women. With regards to ethnicity, it was primarily Arabs and Asians. And it was great to see that 6% of respondents had a disability status. So we get to see responses out there also. Now, with regards to diversity and inclusion in the workplace, a majority of them actually feel that their organizations are actually or actively driving this agenda internally. This was in the GCC, 58% of the respondents felt positively, but we're almost at the global level, which was 60%, slightly low. However, the perception was that the industry is not really doing enough. And as a result, they're likely to lose talent. Yeah? It was 19% of respondents, 8% preferred not to say anything. And was slightly lower than the global response. Now, this is an interesting chart with regards to status and pay of women in the industry. So what you'll see out here is that at the junior level, you get more women than men, and it gets completely flipped at the executive or C-suite level. So obviously, you see a lot of women are entering the industry, but as they progress, they tend to fall off the talent pipeline, right? They tend to change, they tend to leave the industry, they tend to move away, give up their careers, I don't know. And the same is reflected in the pay gap. So women, they start at a lower rate. They start catching up with their male peers. They tend to overtake their male peers. And then once they reach C-suite level, they tend to get underpaid. And I was in this SDG 5 event led by UN Women I think it was last Thursday. And I remember somebody in a panel mentioning that if you have more women at the C-suite level, women will start getting paid more. It's as simple as that. So it's imperative, besides the whole business case, I'm sure you've heard enough of it, women in 500, in companies, where they are at the C-suite level tend to perform much better. Yeah, they bring diversity of thinking, they bring a different mindset, a different way of working, and it's just good business sense. With regards to women's experiences, again, not a good study. 10% of women have experienced discrimination on account of their gender, and it's slightly above the global average, which is at 7%. 47% believe their colleagues would escalate inappropriate behavior, but there are 51% of men actually believe this is more likely to happen. And 66% feel like they belong. Probably seems like a good number, but it's not as good as what men feel. Yeah? And with regards to this, it's equal for men and women in terms of obstacles to career progression based on gender. Ethnic minorities probably feel the most constrained. 24% actually felt a higher level of discrimination because of their ethnicity, and 37% felt obstacles to their career progression. However, despite this, 68% still felt that they belonged, which is really good. And the likelihood of that happening is probably because they have good, if not equal, representation at different levels within the organizational structure. With regards to disability, like I'd mentioned, 6% of the respondents were disabled. The great news is none of them actually experienced any form of discrimination, and however, 33% have faced obstacles in their career progression because of their disability. However, despite that, 60% felt that they belong, but it was a lower number vis-a-vis the global, which is at 68%. And the good news is 53% felt that their colleagues would escalate inappropriate behavior. And vis-a-vis 49% of their counterparts without disabilities. So they have that level of confidence. Coming to, this is really the last slide. I think ageism is, Sally was mentioning, not talked about enough, and it definitely plays a role in the industry. And it, 30%, 31% women respondents, they did not believe that their company treats all employees equally, regardless of family status. So family status obviously comes into play with regards to pay, with regards to career progression, same with treating employees equally, regardless of the age. And 29% of women actually felt that their family status, which is having kids, actually is a hindrance to their career progression. So just as a conclusion, overall, the GCC is amongst one of the leading regions which is kind of embracing change. And we saw some pretty good feedback from people who had a disability. They really didn't feel any level of discrimination against them on account of that. However, there are 3 key metrics that we score slightly below the global average, and this is really with regards to the inclusion, sense of belonging, and absence of discrimination. Again, given the fact that there were 302 responses, we are hoping that in the next stage, we can really shore this up and really get some really, really good feedback so as to, kind of prepare that baseline for ourselves as an industry and prepare an action plan going forward. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Priya, for presenting the D&I data. Very interesting to see. Hopefully, as you said, the respondents will increase in the following year, so we get a better picture of what are some of those KPIs and changes that we could make. I highly recommend and ask that the next rounds, when we send that D&I survey, please take participation. It's really important to get the perspective from our women that are attending here, and men. Also, so we can analyze the data more accurately. And I think setting KPIs for corporates or companies is extremely important, because we continuously talk about changes and how do we impact the diversity, how do we increase diversity, how do we empower women. But the reality is, unless we have set KPIs, we would not be able to make those impacts as corporates, as individuals. And I think the way Snap is approaching D&I has becoming more and more as a priority, which is great to see. Some of the other tech companies are doing the same. And I'm very proud that I could be part of a brand that cares about diversity, cares about inclusion, cares about women empowerment. So we have multiple examples that demonstrates that there are things that you could do to make a change. For example, giving a paternity leave that's similar to the maternity leave, so it empowers and enables the women to not be worried or think that maybe they have a less chance of being hired because potentially maybe they want to have children. This way, we're just treating both genders equally. But other benefits, such as encouraging women to form family, men to form family, things like providing benefits such as IVF or family planning or consulting, with very, very professional coaches for development, or getting some sort of, direction on what are the things that they could do to be able to develop further in their career, or have a mental health, or look after their family and not feel the pressure. So these are some of the things that Snap does globally, and I really admire that some thought leaders are running big corporates like this to think about these changes. And just forming things like ERG, the internal employee resources. I think the main core for us to form these type of multiple ERGs internally is to make sure that we bring the members and the community within our company to be able to talk, be transparent, have a discussion, and really hear out what those individuals' needs are. You can never unify or look at big umbrella of things that you could change. It's all about those diverse experiences, needs. I think the example that Sally mentioned about the Apple, the building, it's insane, right? Like literally insane. We think about physical health and staying fit and healthy so you can work more. No one really thinks that, well, the women to work more also need to pump, also need to have daycare, also need to, little things like that. And unless you hear those stories, build empathy and really understand what are those blockers for women to advance, you will never be able to really make a change. So it is really important that you have a platform where everyone's open and they can discuss and that we can build empathy. We have multiple men allies within our also company that always attend these type of conversations, hear us out. We have executive leaders that sponsor us and really have those type of discussion with the leadership team. At the end of the day, it's just being kind and building empathy and hear everybody's need out so that you can get the best possible outcome of your resources and workforce, and also empower both genders to develop and progress as fast as each other in line. So with that, talking of transparent discussions, I would like to invite our two wonderful panelists onto stage, Ida and Rasha, who have been leading this industry in two areas, the media industry, which we're part of, and also one of our obviously faces of Dubai and sort of like someone who can make a huge impact in terms of society and real citizens that live here, and really empowering younger women as well, like really hearing out those blockers. What is that stereotypic situation that's happening in their head that they think they can't be leaders, they can't progress? UAE is a great example, as Sally mentioned, in terms of taking those leads and those changes. And we want to really be inspired, some of those ideas, what are they thinking in their industry, and also how they became such powerful figures in their industry as well. Please join me to welcome Rasha and Ida.
Hello, everyone. Hi.
Hi. Are you both mic'd up? And
Yes.
Okay,
I think everybody can hear me.
All right.
Otherwise, I'm quite loud enough, so probably don't need the mic.
Amazing. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know there's a lot going on, but I have to say how much I appreciate when you step out of your day-to-day and prioritize important things that could potentially not only change the future of us and us women in this room, but also the future of our daughters, the next gender. So thank you for taking the time and prioritizing this today. So in the line of pretty much about stereotyping, about I would say unconscious a lot of the time stereotyping that's happening in our society. My first question is that how do you see that equality in our region? And probably I start with Rasha, just because I want to really understand within the media industry or within our tech and media industry, how do you see gender equality is building up, or is it there? And some of the things or examples that you think potentially is, maybe there are signs that we don't have that at the moment and we're still facing an issue. I just hear from your end, how would you deal with those as a CEO of an agency, which is run mostly by a lot of men? How do you have a voice in that industry?
Well, first of all, it's such a pleasure to be with in such good company of men and women, and obviously the company with Ida. This is a really, really good question. Do I see an improvement within our industry? The answer is yes. If I am to compare it to what's the benchmark that you're starting with? If you're looking at how our industry was 10, 15 years ago, then the answer is yes. There are much more women representation than we've had in the past. I can certainly speak for the brand that I work for. If I look at it from a global perspective, 70% of leadership are actually women. It's not the other way around. So this is from a Starcom stance, obviously. If I look at it from a regional stance, I think that the conversations, and also just looking at the data that also was presented earlier, is there a rise in awareness of the importance of having diversity and representation in the industry? The answer is yes. Is there enough that is being done? The answer is no. However, I think part of solving for any challenge is acknowledging that there is a challenge and there is something that we need to work towards. And I think this is really an onus to the organizations that we work with in understanding that the only way for them to remain relevant, to sustain, to drive growth, to maximize impact is for them not to just acknowledge at this point in time, but actually to take action. And the action is not necessarily, it doesn't have to be something perfect, but you need to have a pledge towards what are you working. And have an open invitation with everyone that's working within the organization to help them understand, to drive advocacy and awareness of why this is an important discussion for us to have. Why are we even still talking about this in the 21st century, and at this time and age, you'd think, right? But if Sally, you presented like incredible stories and a lot of great statistics, but it's because a lot of these stories haven't been told. It's because we have also in our industry, a lot of the drop-off happens at the middle management layer, And the middle management layer is the time where young women are probably thinking about, either settling in or they want to start a family or what their priorities, just their life priorities completely changed. Women do have a biological clock, men don't, for example, if they do want to start a family. I mean, these are just natural realities of life, right? And I think that this is where corporate policies and the conversations on how we drive equity and inequality and makes a huge difference. And I'm glad that we're having a lot of and engaging in these conversations right now. So I think that from my perspective is a positive thing.
That's great.
Positive movement.
Amazing. Aida, how do you see things happening on a larger scale, I guess, like across the industries and?
Obviously, thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you to the audience. I think both Russia and I were we were literally nodding our heads every time Sally was saying something because we either lived it or we're living it, and we continuously do live in it right now. 100% agree with what Russia has said. I represent, the government and mainly in the tourism and hospitality sector, and very recently the economy as well. One aspect of what we've realized in this particular area, and I guess you could say it's in general in the corporate world, is whilst there's an increase, it's not as substantial as we'd like for it to be, right? And there's a lot of biases around the hospitality sector in general, right? Do you have to serve alcohol? Do I need to be around men? And so these cultural nuances also hold back a lot of people to move forward into what they could potentially be as well. So it's not like you can't equate getting a job to having a career, and those are two separate different things. And in the travel and trade and tourism hospitality industry, there's been an expansive approach towards cultural appropriation, diversification, a lot of equity building as well. Because let's face it, we've all said it in various different ways. Men and women, we keep saying men and women because we are different. We're not built equally, whether it's physically or mentally or emotionally. But we need to realize that when it comes to the processes and policies, there is a lot of equality in it, and it needs to be standardized. But when it comes to building somebody into being somebody, into a C-level, suite level, or whatever it is, building their career, there needs to be an equity division that needs to be driven. So we don't have the same needs and wants. And, you mentioned, Farima, even simple things like, a pumping room. I was told to go to a prayer room to pump, and I had an electric pump, and they said, oh, we don't have a switch there. So even simple things like this, it's a small notion. It doesn't have anything to do. It didn't hinder from me delivering my work or even feeding my baby at the end of the day. But simple things like this actually make a difference. And so the more women you have in these areas, in these corporate areas, makes a big difference in thought process, creativity, diversity, and of course, economic impact, as Rasha mentioned. So, yes.
It's funny, sorry, just to say, just on something that you said, didn't you feel that you almost have something to prove to yourself? When you were talking about pumping in a prayer room, when there was just no fuse, and I think there's a psychological thing where women always feel that they need to work twice as hard to do everything,
But I think it also goes back to the point where if you make enough noise, it's either you make a noise one time or multiple times or big enough, right? So it either falls into one of these categories, something will change. And the good thing about where we work is that there is a level of equality and equity combined, right? It's at 50-50 where we are leveling up to make sure that we do have a percentage that that makes sense for everybody. So just as much as we celebrate Mother's Day, we also celebrate Father's Day. We literally started celebrating Father's Day last year because the men in the organization really felt that they were taking a back seat. And guess who suggested, a woman suggested putting together Father's Day, because that's the level of thought that we had as well. So again, it's making sure that you have those processes, policies, and procedures in place, and not just having it and keeping it there because you can say, oh my God, I've achieved the diversity percentage, but being consistent, coherent, and clear about maintaining that, right? And constantly revising and constantly looking at people and saying, this is what I need to do for my people, and this is what I need to do in order to grow my business, or whatever your end goal is at the end of the day. So.
Absolutely, that makes perfect sense. And in terms of like, I love that Father's Day example as well. Like we forget that, we also need to promote the side of men that also as
Movembers and
all
of that.
We celebrate Movember as well, by the way.
Same, we do that too.
Because I'm sure there are fathers, and I know a lot of fathers are in this room also that have to juggle between, work and family, and it's as important. It's the same thing exactly. And, which takes me to the next question, which is about gender bias. It's a very hard one to define, right? Because we say we're different as women and men, and then we say, that there is gender bias around us at all times. I mean, Sally's great examples really, really clarifies what do we mean by gender bias. The fact that women in history are not mentioned enough, 25% was the stat missing, or they're linked to another person when we introduce them. Oh, that's the wife of, that's the... there are little things that we don't notice them, and we probably even as women do them on a daily basis without noticing, because reality is, I don't think a lot of men out there are purposely doing this, are saying, we're going to just do this just so we're biased towards you. A lot of it is unconscious bias.
Yeah.
So just for like everyone's a little bit of knowledge, like what are some of those that you've experienced in your career that you can probably...
Russia, I'm glad that you're dying to talk first.
No, Russia, Russia goes first.
What have I experienced in my career that was gender bias? Look, I think that the honest answer is, I'm sure many, but I'll just tell you just the mindset at least that I've always had, because I'm one of 5 girls. So I was raised in by in the 80s father that wanted to raise very assertive young women, and he was very proud of that. You spoke about boys don't cry. So I was raised with a father who says girls don't cry. The girls express themselves. Say how you feel. Talk. Give your opinion. It was so important for him that that me and my sisters had an opinion, and whether we agreed or didn't, it just didn't really matter. It was an opinion. So that is the culture that I was raised in. So the question really becomes, was there any sort of bias in my experience throughout the job? I'm sure there is. The reason I keep saying I'm sure there is, but I can't really think of anything, because I think my mindset has always been that if it's the bias, it's coming from somewhere else. It doesn't really it doesn't define me. It's you. You are biased. So when it happens, I speak about it. I obviously put forward my perspective and my point of view, or I probably raise it to that person's consciousness in case they're doing it, it's in a, subconsciously. They're not necessarily consciously being biased, but I think my mindset has always been that it is not necessarily my problem. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It is a conversation to be had with that person, but then you just stay focused on what you want to actually drive and remain true to who you want to be. And for sure, I think, again, I speak of my personal experience. I feel a lot of the times that I've had a lot of challenges, they were much more internal focused challenges that I've had self-inflicted because of culture, because you want to prove yourself, because you work so hard, because you want that growth, because you want that next promotion, because you deserve it. You want it and you deserve it. But also I think what is really important for young men and women, but women in particular, because of the whole representation, is to be confident enough to say what you want. Don't be afraid to say, well, you know what, this is what I'm working towards, and find those allies to help you get there, wherever they are. And the allies, by the way, are at work, but they're also in your personal space. It's who you marry, who your partner is, who you choose to surround yourself around. And then you take it one day at a time after you do that.
Agree.
I know I didn't answer your question directly, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
really
no,
been my personal,
that is
personal
really
experience. Of course, there's been a lot of like, oh, you know, when I got married, for example, and someone was like, oh, are you planning to have kids? And someone was like, no, she's definitely not going to have kids now. Like, we've got a lot going on. I know it must have been just like a thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, if I really took that to heart, you wouldn't want to hear that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't intentionally because that person was like, you know, I'm going to make her feel bad. It was just, oh, it's a cultural thing. We just joke around. Female men jokes, ha ha ha, very funny. And I'd be like, ha ha ha, it's not. You know, I'm not laughing.
Casual.
I'm not laughing, but you know, you put everything in context, right? For me, it's very important to put everything in context because, especially in Dubai, because it's such a diverse and cosmopolitan place, right? And different people have different experiences, different backgrounds, different cultures at home, different cultures in nationalities and whatever it is. Yeah, just put everything in context, and that in a way kind of, in Arabic we say بتحجم القصص, like you yeah, exactly, you give it its size, it's and it stops impacting you. You just say, well, it's a small little thing, and I'm here, and I'm going to look at it like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And solve for it from the top, not solve for it being kind of stuck.
But I think talking about like standing up and kind of clarifying helps as well, because again, it's unconscious, right? So I have an example that, you know, my child was small and we were all sitting in a meeting room and discussing, and everyone said, oh yeah, you have to go home, right? Because you have you can go, because you have to go look after your child and put it, you know, him to bath, and and this is a really important meeting that determines a lot of decision making. That, you know, and I looked around and I said, no, I don't actually have to go. In fact, I do have to go, but you all have to go.
Yes.
Because you can't continue, and a lot of you are fathers as well, so you can't continue making really important decisions. I'm the only one who needs to go, right? So you don't. So I'm sure no one in that meeting room thought, oh, we're going to make decisions behind her back. But it was kind of like, you need to be a mother. We need to make decisions quick, right? And it's like, no, it can wait.
Yeah.
Let's meet back at 8 o'clock when my child is asleep and your children are asleep. Did you have any examples?
Oh my God. So as girly as I might look right now, once upon a time I was a tomboy. And I actually used to fight on behalf of my brothers who were younger than me. My mom actually used to introduce me when people would say, oh, mashallah, you have, you know, a girl and 2 boys. And she'd say, I have 3 boys. This is before my youngest sister was born. Because and it wasn't because I identify more, it's just, this was who I am. You know, some people are born into or have a personality that basically just defines what they want to do in life, right? And which is taking charge. And you can be the CEO of your own life. You don't have to be a CEO of in an organization, but you need to be a CEO of your life, right? Which is the taking charge part. And have you guys watched this movie, Inventing Anna? Okay, not about her. It's not about her. It's about one of the characters said, if you let your emotion take over you, you become a character in somebody else's story. So there have been plenty of times where I was subjected to 3 main types of discrimination. One, for being young. I graduated from university when I was 20, started my first job when I was 20. Because the school system wasn't adjusted then, so I think you could just go to school at like 3 or 2, or I don't even know what happened back then. We didn't have a KHDA. Number 2, because I'm Emirati, okay? I don't walk around with a blue passport on my forehead, okay? So it's basically undermining that you're skillful, or that you probably are just doing the job, but you actually have a rich oil field and a camel in your backyard, okay? And then the third point is actually more from family, but I think a lot of people have that mentality as well, is that you always have to do the right thing. لازم تقومين بالواجب. You have to do your obligations, right? And so those 3 different types of discrimination have come in various different parts of my career. And I've sat on tables, you know, with men on a full table where I was the only female. I was the only female. I was the only Emirati, and I was the youngest one. So you're like, okay, Do I need to answer to you, or do we need to answer to the question together? So yes, discrimination is still there. There is a lot of gender bias that is happening in there, but I think after a while, if you stop internalizing that bias, it stops becoming your notion of what people think of you. The more we talk about it and acknowledge it, that becomes your reality. So I don't believe in gender biasness for myself. I've got 2 boys, and we talked about this as well, and Russia's got a boy and a girl.
Yeah.
And for me, it's about the skill set, it's about the duties and the tasks and responsibilities. So if the house is dirty, if I made a mess, I will clean it up. Not because I'm the woman and I'm the mommy, but if you made a mess with your toys, you clean it up, you pick it up. Just because you have a nanny doesn't mean she has to pick it up, right? So because that role transfer or that responsibility transfer automatically starts making people think from a young age, we need to segregate the roles of what gender bias is all about. So yes, I face it. I still face it until today, and in different ways. Sometimes it's very undercut. We casually put in a comment or a question. Like, how was your holiday after I came back from maternity leave? It wasn't a holiday.
I know, yeah.
I brought a human to the world. How is that a holiday? Would you like a C-section? No. It's not nice, It's a proper surgery.
I gotta go to
7 layers,
well,
7 layers of skin, Recovery time. They're like, 9 months to make one, 9 months to recover. No, it's not 9 months. No, it's not. So, yeah, gender bias does exist. I wasn't on holiday. I haven't been on holiday since I gave birth, and so I just want to make it very clear. And we're still standing, We're still making waves, and we're still talking, and we're breaking barriers every single day, right? So take it every day at a time, as Russia said.
Absolutely. I think another thing, a lot of our women, when we discuss in between us, that pops up and comes, kind of become an issue that is kind of internal, as you said. You kind of need to make peace here and empower yourself here and really think, who do you think you are, really? Is actually dealing with imposter syndrome, right? You both lead in your industry, and I'm sure there would be multiple examples where, as you were obviously going, becoming more of a face of your company or becoming a leader in that, sort of industry, you felt that maybe through those experiences. How did you feel it, or did you see other women in your organization feel it? And what's your advice for women?
Oh, I've had a couple of horrible female bosses. Horrible, just horrible. Yeah. Full stop. But I think the reality of things are, it boils down to what you want to put out to the world, right? I mean, I'm not going to be here for a while. I've been in a couple of industries as well. It's what do you want to leave as a legacy at the end of the day? Do you want to be known as someone who, took charge by, being the aggressive one or being the female one? No, you want to be known as a leader in your industry, right? And again, I think what I want to break away is from the narrative of like, is it a gender-related thing or is it a diversity-related thing? I think it's a human-related thing at the end of the day. So, yes, you will always face it, and I run a team, a combined team of over 29 people. And there are a lot of young people as well. And so when you reach a certain level, they tend to not realize that this imposter syndrome actually comes across in so many different ways, in so many different areas. And so it's our job to teach and to give back. So that's kind of the legacy that I want to leave. I don't want to leave them with, and so they need to realize that this is out there. We've come to the point, I think, that we realize that it's out there. Yeah. So we're able to recognize it within seconds or within minutes or whatever. But it's for somebody else that doesn't recognize that there is an imposter syndrome. So I think that's the legacy that I want to leave. It's recognizing that it's there and acknowledging it. And you choose, do you want to let it go? Do you want to address it head on? Some things really don't need to be addressed head on, right? You can just let it go because, again, it goes back to the point that we said, the more you internalize it, it becomes your reality. So, you can be an imposter all you want, Yeah.
100%. You end up modeling what you want to be at the end of the day, right? I'm a firm believer in that. Going back to, you have to define who are you, who are you as a person? If you're very clear in your mind who you are as a person, I think everything else becomes as I said, you see everything from a macro perspective, and then you kind of look down at everything. You remove yourself emotionally from the situation, and you're able to think in a much more, like, I don't say like rational, but in a wise way as well. Because it's not just about being rational. You need to have that bit of wisdom as well. That I think is really, really important at the same time. But it's funny when we were talking about kids, and because again we were sharing some stories. But my daughter Layla is 5, and a couple of weeks ago they had World Book Day at school. And the teacher obviously shares all these pictures of what's happening in class, and there's my little Layla, dressed in her costume, because they have to dress her favorite character, and she's dressed in Paw Patrol, and she chose to be Marshall. And then her dad was like, Papi, why are you Marshall? You can be, why don't you want to be Sky? Sky is like, she travels, she flies, she's got wings. She's like, she's got no superpowers, Daddy. I want to be Marshall. I want to lead the pack, And it's funny because she was standing there with her little book, and all the girls in her class were like fairies and princesses, and there was my Layla, in her little book, with her little book and her little mask, and she's standing there, and I'm like, that's my girl, that's my girl, But it's funny because it's the same thing when we talk about how you raise boys and girls. Because with my son, it's the same thing, So when we have that conversation, he'll always tell me like, what matters is character, mommy. Like, I know Kung Fu Panda, the panda's the strong one, but the tiger, she's the smart one. Like, I'd rather be her. Yeah. And it's not because he's identifying with her as a male or female. He's 9, and even though whatever it is, but the idea is that he's identifying with the characteristic of the, and what the character actually represents.
True.
And language then really starts to matter at home or even in the workplace. Yeah, working parent versus working mom. Absolutely. No one calls my husband a working dad. You know what I mean? I don't go around going like, "Great, well done, working dad."
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for all this wonderful conversation. I just wanted to actually invite Sally and Priya, if you don't mind, to join us on stage. Thank you. We just want to spend the next 5-10 minutes really just opening it to audience, to our women ERG who are here and supporting this, today's conversation, and really just hear from you. Any questions for our keynote presenters or panelists? We've got a few amazing women and very inspiring, figures in our industry. So please, if anyone has any questions, if you come forward, that'll be great.
Not all of you at once, huh? Please.
But it's rather about saying my merit was pretty much what got me where I am. And this was amazing. That's all I wanted to say.
So I think Snap does a lot as a company to meet these things and address these things. So what would be the one thing in your career that a company has done or you've implemented at a company that you think has made a real difference?
I'd say one of the things that we've been trying to do is fundamental to changing the conversation is being very cognitive of our choice of words and language. Small little things matter a lot, I remember there was this guy in my team whose wife chose to be, a mom. She just wants to, not just to be a mom, as in she doesn't necessarily have a career. So that was her personal choice. And we would always joke that 2 weeks, he's got leaves, right? And he would give her also just her leave days because he recognized the fact that, she deserves that time off. And the joke would always be that, it's Priya's time off. Her name was Priya. So Priya's time off. And we would just kind of sign that leave for him as well to spend more time with his family. That's not the point, though. The point was and that was like many, many years ago, but the idea was we made it a thing to say that it was Ravi's time to step up, and that is what he's actually doing. The same thing that we talk about what women are actually trying to do. So I think shifting conversation, shifting the mindset becomes really, really important. How you talk and how you celebrate and how you create that psychological safety of acceptance that you can just be, and that is okay, is I think fundamental to how we're trying to slowly start to shift culture. Internally. That's, I think, that what I would say is has been really, really key. Because the more you hear something, the more you sort of believe it, and it just becomes the norm, right?
I think it was in 2018, we rolled out a policy that working moms could get 2 days out of the month to just do whatever they wanted to do. It was so successful, so we piloted it for 3 months, and then we piloted it for all the employees. And now it's become a policy that you can have 2 working days per week to actually be at home. And then the additional stuff that we did as well is for every celebration, if it's direct, so your parents, your husband and your children, you're able to take 3 hours off either in the morning or 3 hours off earlier. For any special occasions, we recently celebrated International Women's Day, like everybody else, although every day it is International Women's Day. So yeah, all the women got to go out, and we had a really nice celebration, and then the rest of the day was off. So the policy is there, but it's like the small things that build up to actually make sure that it's there, that it actually supports that policy. So it's not just words, it's actually talking the talk rather than saying, okay, why don't we? And so this was based on a survey and understanding, and then the additional thing I have to say though, in the last 6 months, there have been at least 40 women who have been promoted into mid-management level at Dubai Tourism. Yeah, 40% of the overall total there.
So I think at Unilever, one of the, and again, something, so I was just looking at some global data today, and I know you mentioned 70% are women. That's amazing. At Unilever today, we are 52% women, mid and senior management, 52% versus 48% men. So it's been, and in our region, because this is one of the very sensitive regions for Unilever globally, and there's always been a lot of focus. And we've actually moved our numbers from across MENA. I think in 2010, 2012, it was at 12%, and it's now moved up to about 38%. UAE, we are at about 42% women in mid and senior management. But there's a lot of work that has happened, that has gone behind it, a lot of commitment by senior leadership, a lot of target setting. I know there's a lot of questions, especially from the male colleagues, saying, are you promoting women only because of targets and numbers? And no, the conversation that we always have is around performance. It's always been very clear. But I think what is very interesting is last year we introduced a menstrual leave policy. Yeah, this is not a conversation that happens. Yeah. And whenever women need to take that day off at that point in the month, they have to make up 100 excuses. Yeah, it's about whatever, you got to be shy about asking for that leave. And we just thought we had to bring this conversation forward. Yeah, make it the norm. Yeah, and we've been very, we've talked about it in social media. We're very proud of the fact we're pushing it, and we're very clear, women can take this leave, no questions asked. And you say, I'm putting in menstrual leave. Of course, it's not as simple as just introducing it. We're also trying to see how many women are actually taking that leave. So we're tracking, we're encouraging women. We're saying, take that leave. Yeah. So I think that's a big one, and we really want to try and break that bias and start those conversations. So I think that's a good one that we introduced in our region last time.
Interesting. Thank you.
One of the biggest ones. I love that you just said that.
That is just hands down the best thing that was said today.
The lining of your uterus is literally clawing itself out of your body once every single month, and you feel like you're dying. I don't know, I feel like that on the first couple of days, and we are still, we have to power away, right? So this is amazing. I love that. And I just want to, before we take more questions, there's a couple of comments to what you guys have been saying. Amazing. Like, just thank you for all of that. Like, Khursha, what you were saying about, we can't internalize the biases that get thrown at us. Because when you are a woman, when you're an immigrant from the Middle East and whatever, you have so many biases being thrown in your direction. You have to be a freaking superwoman to overcome all of the obstacles and the challenges. So it's literally built into your psyche, isn't it? I mean, I felt what you were saying. you just don't think like that. You don't have the space to process what people are trying to throw in your direction, because you have to prove yourself 10 times more than the other people around you just to feel like that you belong in that place. And what you were saying about, my God, maternity leave and the holiday. Let's just like really, we have to understand this. Like, there is no such thing as a non-working mother. Every mother works. Mothers who are at home do unpaid work, which is lifting up all of society. Listen to any man who's very honest about this. Who knows Quincy Jones? One of the greatest musicians and producers in the world, one of my favorites. Watched the documentary about him the other day on Netflix. And he said in this, he said, you know, my wife, Peggy Lipton, she left her career to take care of our kids so that I could do what I did for him to become a legend. There's another incredible book everyone should read. It's called The Startup Wife. Fantastic. Tackles all of this. It's so racy and fantastic by Tamima Anam, brilliant writer. Hopefully that's going to be a Netflix series as well. But amazing book, talks all about this stuff as well. But thank you for sharing that, because it's so important. So thank you.
Can I just share one other thing? I was talking to you about the Unstereotype Alliance. Unilever is one of the largest advertisers, right, globally. We, of course, have our internal. You have to start with your workplace. You've got to meet that commitment and ensure you're doing it internally. But what we also do externally is that we try and ensure that we are pushing our partners, so clients and our agencies and production houses, to ensure that they are using a lot of female talent to produce our ads. So Lux, for instance, in this region, I think for their advertising, they now have their agencies, production houses, creative partners, for all their films, 100% women. So, you've got to use the power that you have to also drive that change externally.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you for sharing all this wonderful learnings, honestly. Like, for all of us, we could replicate a lot of those learnings. I'm just cautious of time. I want to take Lamis. Hi.
I just have a comment. Recently at LinkedIn, we just introduced the career breaks. So speaking of motherhood, this is amazing, because a mother can take 2 years off to take care of her family and just mention it on her profile that she has done, like she has taken a career break, and include all the soft skills that she acquired, because motherhood is really a full-time job.
Yeah. Good one.
So I just wanted to update you on this.
That's a really nice one, actually. Really good one.
If we don't have any other questions, Yara.
Still think that we need an International Women's Day? Isn't it counterintuitive to the gender equality discussion?
No, we don't need one. So just on that point, and this is food for thought, right? I always think when you leave, you need to start recognizing certain things. And I always tell people you need to learn 3 things after you've exited, you've had this session. You need to do 3 things that are completely different. I'll only ask you to do 1 thing today. So this is my 1 thing that I'm doing today. Actually, this is my 2nd thing that I'm doing different today, but this is my first thing to you guys. I need you to start recognizing the differences that are out there. The minute you step out, just go to the gift shop store. Girl toy, boy toy. Girl toy is much more expensive than a boy toy. The Gap, H&M, whatever, boy section, girl section. Same t-shirt, double the price. Same t-shirt, quarter the price. When you spoke about the gender pay gap, women get paid less, but we're asked to pay more. So start noticing these things, because the differentiator is not just having these conversations, it's actually noticing that these things and making enough noise about it, because why should it be different? Are there parts made out of gold and diamond that we don't know about?
The same shavers. Same shavers. Go to the shaving section in the supermarket. The exact same shavers. Way more expensive for women than for men.
It's the ad. I'm your Venus.
All right.
It's all in the ad, I'm telling you.
Sorry, and I just wanted to reply. I shook my head when you say, isn't it counterintuitive? But I have to say, it's conversations like this, right, that actually get you thinking. Yeah, it gets the conversation started. And I think it is important. And all the events that I've been to, I think one of the things everybody has said, Sally, including the SDG 5, is that we should make every day International Women's Day. Yes, true. But I think we need that focus. We need to ensure that we're continuing that conversation. Yeah. And the other thing that I want to leave with is that, at least at Unilever, we've now started driving the conversation beyond diversity and inclusion. Can anybody say where?
Where?
It's on equity now.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's very important that you understand the concept of equity. Equity is understanding that everybody has different requirements. Yeah. The concept of inclusion is that, okay, I'll open the door to everybody, but equity is recognizing not everybody has the same skill sets to race through that door at the same time. Yeah. So we've got to ensure that the people who don't have that skill set do receive that extra help, that extra support to be able to perform. Yeah. So I think it's very important, and that's how this is the change that is happening. We otherwise, till last year, we were just talking about diversity and inclusion. But we at Unilever have now started talking about equity. And this is very important when our male counterparts ask us, but the focus is always on women. Yes, the focus is on women because it's not a balanced state. You've got to understand that women are not treated as equal. Until we reach that space, we've got to continue that conversation. We've got to keep moving that baseline. We've got to keep pushing. So I think it's important that we keep having these conversations and we keep changing that mindset, because even diversity and inclusion is not enough anymore. Yeah. We've now got to start talking about equity. How can we make each other equitable? How can we start providing support to those people who don't have it anymore?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Do you have one last one?
Add to that? That was super important. And just like, adding to kind of the point, okay, what do we do now? Can I just say, I love the fact that we have men at this event. That is so vitally important. I don't want to be having women-only events anymore. We need to be hearing from each other. At the SDG 5 Summit, we had a panel with men talking about how they see the situation, how they see the problem, what they could be doing, what they could be doing more of. So that's amazing. So thank you for doing that. Amazing, fantastic. But also let's start kind of, like you said, Ida, noticing these biases that happen, particularly, when you're looking at cross-sectional, intersectional biases as well between different cultures. And I wore the hijab for 18 years. And I can tell you, without the shadow of a doubt, I was treated differently and not given the same opportunities when I was wearing the hijab. As soon as I took it off, I was offered things that I was like, this is insane. And so I still spend so much of my time standing up for Muslim women who are visibly Muslim, because it is so vital. Across the world, we see the examples. They are being excluded on multiple levels just for looking Muslim, just for wearing a hijab. They just want to be who they are. They want to play football. They want to get into sport. They want to be part of society. They want education. Stop calling them oppressed when you are standing in their way. Right? So just please notice where this is happening and be part of the solution. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, Feems. I just have one thing to say from a male representation side of things. First of all, this is my first women's session. All you ladies on the stage spoke from the heart, and it reached my heart. And I promise from this day onwards, I'll attend more of these, listen to more podcasts around. So thank you very much.